Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Mars in Aries conjoining Chiron in Aries. This conjunction is effectively reactivating the solar eclipse in Aries, which was exactly conjoined Chiron back in April. So we're going to look at the connection between these two events today and talk about 5 different Mars-Chiron themes that you can watch for both today and maybe what you've already been noticing this week as the transit has been building, what you may notice through the weekend. So that's our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel to grow when you guys click the subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, we appreciate you being here. You can find a transcript of any of our daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. We post them every day. Right now, 2 promotions that I want to share with you. Going over to the Nightlight Astrology website, go to the events page, click on live talks, and you will find that on June 13th, I'm giving my next monthly webinar on the 12th house. I've called it The World We Struggle to See. And this is about understanding the dynamic between the rising sign in your chart and the 12th whole sign, the relationship between the two, and the healing potential that exists in that relationship for each of us in our birth charts. So check that out coming up soon. If you can't make the live talk June 13th in the evening with the webinar, we send you a recording so you can watch it afterward. The other thing that we are promoting right now are the courses that begin in June. First year course in Hellenistic astrology begins June 16th. You can learn more about that on the first year course page. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can find need-based tuition assistance, which is available for all of our programs. This allows people to choose within a sliding scale your monthly tuition commitment. And we do that to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying astrology if you're on a limited fixed income, experiencing financial hardship, stuff like that. If you stick around today, after the regular content is over, you will see an informational video that I've tagged on to the end of today's talk on the horary astrology program, which also begins in June. If you've never seen a horary reading before, you can see me do a horary reading. And you can also learn more about what horary is and how to get involved if you want to come study in that program with us, which also starts in June. So anyway, those are our promotions for the day. Thank you guys for listening. And let's turn our attention now to the Mars-Chiron conjunction, which is present today. So let us look at the chart. Here's the real-time clock. And I am going to use my epic pen to point it out. Here we are, Wednesday, May 29th. We have Mars and Chiron conjoining. Now, if I move this forward just one day, you'll see that by tomorrow, Mars has crossed over and is moving into the 23rd degree. If I back this up and give it about a 3-degree range, we can see that from about May 26th, Sunday, and we'll give it 3 degrees of separation all the way until about Sunday, June 2nd, the transit is in effect. Now, the Mars-Chiron dynamic is, you guys know on my channel, I don't usually track Chiron. It's not a big part of my repertoire, even though I was born with it on my ascendant, by the way, which I think is a big deal. Anyway, so let's back this up, though, to April. What I want to point out here is that we had a solar eclipse, and I'm going to put this up to the top of the sky. You can see this solar eclipse that came through on April 8th. Was at the 19th degree where the sun is exalted in Aries, and it was exactly conjoined Chiron. So the ruler of that eclipse was Mars. Mars was in Pisces with Saturn. Mars has since moved into the sign of the eclipse in its own rulership and has now been going over the degree of the eclipse and now into a conjunction with Chiron, who is at the heart of that eclipse, which is why this is a significant date to look at. What this Mars-Chiron conjunction is effectively doing is reactivating the solar eclipse and all of its momentum, all of its intentions, all of the learning that it pointed to, the seeding of a new cycle that it was directing us toward, and all of the healing benefits and potential of the eclipse and its significations because of Chiron being so present in it. So given all of that, I want us to visit 5 Mars-Chiron themes today that could be useful for us in understanding what that eclipse was about and how we're seeing some of those themes reiterated now and again spreading out from right now going forward. It's like little waves of the same themes coming through. So And I'm going to share something that I shared on my YouTube community page recently. You guys know I like to share little personal elements of my own experience with the transits. I also think it's healthy to do this because when we hear stories, it helps us to go searching for our own story. So anyway, one of the big things that happened for me, I'll just share briefly, I won't labor it, is that as this eclipse happened, coming into pretty close square with my natal sun, and also as some of the Jupiter-Uranus dynamic was happening very close to my ascendant, squaring my ascendant ruler, which was pretty active in my chart, in other words, I decided, as you guys know, for a couple of years now, I've been really turning my focus from a lot of my life being very intellectual, very spiritual, to being much more physical. Now, that doesn't mean that the intellectual or the spiritual part of me is gone, but I would say that, like, up until very recently, the neglected part of my life was the physical dimension. And so there's been this really radical shift since I left the Bhakti yoga community to be looking at the body as a temple, to be looking at physical activity, exercise, health, and wellness as just as valid a means of spiritual and personal growth and development as anything else I've ever done, which has been new to me. That's been, believe it or not, for me, that's been a complete revolution. So anyway, as I've been, moving more and more into my body, especially through resistance training and fitness and things like that, diet and working with a nutritionist and a coach and so forth, I realized that I have like the equivalent of like call it a midlife crisis goal. Like when people decide, I want to run a triathlon, I want to run a marathon, and they do it at some stage in life as a way of moving through obstacles internally. Like I think, for example, my mom's partner started running marathons earlier in his life as a way of sort of amplifying his recovery work as a recovering alcoholic. So he started running marathons, and it kind of gave him a little extra juice for continued personal growth. And I realized sort of recently in the past year that I have something like that. And I started getting really like self-conscious about it because I was like, people are going to think it's so dumb, But I really was like, I would love to train intensively for a few years and participate in an amateur, like nothing serious, right? And not to win, but just to participate in an amateur bodybuilding competition where basically you're trying to build your body as best you can, and not in a not like not like the pros who end up looking like the Incredible Hulk or anything. I'm talking about something very, very basic and specifically for amateurs who are in their 40s, right? So it's like my triathlon. And I got really clear about, as the eclipse happened, it went from something I wanted to do, but really couldn't admit to anyone because I thought it was kind of an embarrassing and like shallow thing to want to do, to being like, no, I really want to do this. And then I talked to my coach about it. And right in the wake of the eclipse, I said, no. So we've set forth about a 2 to 3 year training plan that I'm going to follow in the attempts to simply participate, really with no goal of winning, but just to participate in something like this. And I was realizing, like, as I was sort of owning that, this is something I actually want to do, that this was so in line with the Aries eclipse and where everything had been showing up in my chart and stuff like that. And I say this because almost every theme I am going to mention today, I think I've noticed, this list basically comes from what I've noticed in the wake of recognizing this within me and talking to my coach and actually laying out a plan and feeling and experiencing this as a tremendous source of healing and growth for me personally. So anyway, that's my story. Now let me show you 5 Mars-Chiron themes, and the question here is, where do you see these themes in your life? And if something from my story may prompt you to do a little bit more reflecting, then I think that's a good thing. So number 1, admitting what we want. So one of the big themes with Aries in general and Mars in general is about recognizing that there is a dimension in each of us that's like a metaphorical hunter. I want that. Like when my when my dog, who you can see, I think you can, let's see if we can move. Can you see? There's Hilda. There she is. Oh, look at the thumb. So when Hilda sees a squirrel, it's very clear. I want that squirrel. It's very instinctual. It's very like libidinal, and it's kind of primal. But that's Mars. And of course, there are examples of things that we want that are not necessarily healthy, or that may be destructive or egotistical or violent or oppressive or something like that. what I'm thinking about when I think about Mars and Chiron coming together, and when I think about Chiron at the heart of that recent solar eclipse in Aries, is being like, there are things that we want that we are afraid to admit that we want because we have judgments, or we fear what other people will think, or we fear that people will think that there's something bad about what we want, or that it's too much, or something like that. So much of the sign of Aries has to do with just going for it, just saying, no, this is something I want to do. I want to create a business. I want to go to school. I want to ask that person out. I want to run a triathlon or participate in a bodybuilding competition. Whatever it is, we have to first be able to admit that it is what we want, and sort of get clear and liberate ourselves from the guilt or the shame, or whatever it might be. Again, like, that doesn't mean, there's some of us who probably have some things we want to do that, maybe for one reason or another, they actually aren't very healthy. Maybe there's some discernment that has to be used. But I really do think that the exalted sun with Chiron at the heart of Aries has to do with the boldest and most vulnerable things that we desire. It's like, Hilda cannot hide that she likes squirrels. And there's part of us that's like that. That's my point. Number two, being brave about who we are. This is less about admitting what we want and more about just recognizing that there are parts of us that we can't hide. So being brave about who we are and admitting what we want often go hand in hand, but there are subtle differences. It's funny how frequently you will see transits through the sign of Aries, regardless of what house they're in the chart, corresponding with people admitting, I'm an astrologer, or I'm gay, or this is who I am, and I can't. I can do nothing but own it. So being brave about who we are is healing, especially when we've been hiding. There's something like the sun coming out and taking over from the darkness in that first sign of the year that is very similar to just coming out of some kind of metaphorical identity closet, right? And coming and just saying, this is who I am. And when we do that, it's like our light can dawn on the world. And then we have to deal with the consequences of our light dawning on the world. And rather than shying away from that confrontation of being ourselves and being met by other people, which can be a confrontation, like it can be scary. And sometimes people will try to clip our wings, or they'll oppose us, but we have to go through that. And we say to ourselves, it is more important to go through that and be who I am than to hide. So, yeah. And I just think about all of the different ways that we challenge ourselves in life at different times, where we feel like we have to take on some kind of challenge that sort of symbolically related to that. Like, okay, if I think, for example, about, why people run marathons or triathlons, or they do something. I'm going to go I'm going to climb Mount. I was just watching a documentary about people in their, in their 30s, their 40s, or 50s who decide to climb Mount Everest. And I was thinking about that. I was watching this. I was feeling called out, because I was like, oh, I really want to do this thing, but I'm feeling sort of guilt, like I feel weird about it. And then I started getting more confident about doing it or whatever. And I just thought, there are times in our lives where it doesn't really matter. Like when you get to the top of these people, they get to the top of Mount Everest and they plant their little flag in there. They take their picture. In this documentary, they were asking people, like, do you feel like you accomplished what you set out to accomplish? And they were like, well, it felt great to get to the top, but it was more about something I needed to do for me. And so sometimes we have to do things or externally assert our will through some kind of challenge or heroic opportunity. And we have to do it not so much because it literally matters that we get to the top of Everest or that we finish the marathon or whatever it is, but it's that we did something that maybe we didn't think we could do, and we did it. And it ends up being about proving something to ourselves, nobody else. That's such an Aries theme. And there's so much healing potential in doing things like that. Or, by the way, there's also some weird way. And I mean, I could see it going the opposite direction, where someone says, I'm going to let myself off the hook of feeling like the only thing I can the only way I can prove my worth is to do some big heroic thing. Chiron and Aries may be the healing that says, no, it's like cosmic Mr. Rogers. You are beautiful just the way you are. There's nothing you need to do or overcome or heroically assert. You don't need to climb to the top of Mount Everest. You know, there was interesting because part of the documentary showed many people who, as the elevation increased, as they were climbing up Mount Everest, they had to give up. They had to go back down, and they had to basically admit defeat. But that too, for so many of the people, when they interviewed them, they were like, this is what I came here to experience. I came here to do this, and I was ready to, I'm disappointed that I didn't make it to the top, but the failure and doing the best I could and meeting that edge was also beautiful. And I got what I was looking for internally. And there were so many people in this documentary who kept saying that, even when they failed and had to go back down to base camp. So I think that's important too, is that it's not just about heroic outcomes and, you know, achieving things. It's also about just giving it your best and doing something you don't think you could do. And even if you fail, oh, well, the process of saying, I'm going to give it my all, I'm going to try something, or I'm going to, even just saying I accept defeat or failure, but I'm confident enough to do so. Number 3 goes in line with that, which is healing confidence. There's so many different ways we can build confidence or heal broken confidence. 1 is by doing something. 2 is by not feeling like we have to do something. But I think either way, the recent eclipse in Aries brings up the theme of, do you feel strong? Do you feel confident? What does healthy confidence look like? And how do you get there? You get there as much through the challenges you embrace and take on as those that you dismiss yourself or forgive yourself from having to accomplish. There's a tension always between the two things. One of the things I love about weight training and as I'm learning more about bodybuilding, and I think it's so interesting, is that so I'll give you a little metaphor. So let's say I have 4 sets of an exercise to do. And oftentimes I'll pick a weight that I can do for the first 3 sets, right? But then I get to the 4th set and I can't get to my rep range. And I remember just going through workout after workout after workout where I just couldn't allow, my ego wouldn't allow me to just go down in weight so that I could carry that weight through an 8 to 12 rep range for all 4 sets. And maybe I'm doing 12 the first 3 and 8 on the last one, as opposed to getting to the last one and only being able to do 2 or something, you know? It's like so I found that there's a lot of little metaphors like that in resistance training, where we have to learn how to be like, so one of the bravest things we can do, in other words, is learn our limits and learn to say like, oh, I can't do that much. Or like, for example, when you say yes to things and you're saying yes because you want people to think you're capable, you know, but then there comes this time where you realize that you can't competently carry what you've committed to all the way through. And you have to be brave enough to sort of sit back and go, I've learned that I can commit, but only as much as I can actually carry through to completion. That's just as much an important kind of learning lesson in building confidence as heroically carrying more than you know people think you can, or something like that, or proving to yourself I can carry way more. There's something about saying, what can I carry well? What can I carry that's not a strain, but that I can do presently? Like, what can I commit to with my kids where while I'm there, I'm actually present? That's another thing that's hard to do, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm going to give 10 times more than I have to my kids in a situation. And then they end up getting a lot of me that's like not present. And that's going to stand out more than the little of me that was, you know? So you know, like, what can I give that actually allows for me to be present when I'm with my kids as a parent? It's like a similar thing to figuring out how to carry the right weight through 4 whole sets, you know? All these beautiful little things, but they have so much to do with, in the sign of Aries and this eclipse that we've been through, Chiron, so much of it has to do with adjusting our expectations so that confident, strong qualities are actually aligned with what we have to give, what our inner resources actually are. So much of confidence has to do with accurately assessing where we are and being okay with it. If you can be okay with where you are, then you can give strong things in accordance with who you really are. So anyway, lots of little things I've been thinking about with respect to this one. I hope they're interesting. Working with aggression, anger, and competition. Like, just generally speaking, none of these are qualities that any of us like to admit or admit. I don't like to admit that I'm competitive. I don't like to openly, I don't like people to see that I get angry. You know, I don't like people to encounter any aggressive qualities in me, because they're all things that I think, generally speaking, you know, people we're ashamed. Any of us are like, I'm ashamed that I can get angry, or that I can be aggressive, or that I'm competitive. But it's far better to actually own these parts of ourselves and to learn to work with them in ways that are, I don't know, integrated somehow. It's better to be competitive, but to have laughter and good sportsmanship. It's good to be competitive, but also unattached to results in some larger sense. It is good to be in touch with the energy of anger and what it can do for us, and also how it is destructive, and being aware of the diverse ways in which that hot, heated Mars energy can express itself, so that the word anger is like it's like a multi-dimensional, fruit. It's like a flower with all sorts of different parts and fruits available to us. We also, and that's why in so many different religious and spiritual traditions, we think about things like anger in relation to a broader elemental category, like fire. It's not just anger; it can be other things. How do we diversify, our energetic portfolio with respect to the energy of anger? It's like where we have investments in these different areas that we can use fire. Aggression is similar. Like, aggression can get things done, but it can also be destructive. Most of us will face the temptation of, completely compartmentalizing, pushing all of these things away, because we feel that they are socially, they make us socially vulnerable, or they are things to be ashamed of. And so then we never get to develop, refine, or work with them. This eclipse energy and Mars hitting Chiron again allows us to perhaps open that up a little, open these qualities up a little bit. Finally, I would just say, broadly speaking, I use the word masculine here, but I mean this energetically, more like the word yang. How are we working to heal, incorporate, live with the reality of that yang energy? We can call it masculine, but I think of this as beyond literal gender or sex categories. I think of this as that centrifugal yang force, and the way it shows up in nature, in behavior, in relationships, in the world, in the universe, in in physics, whatever. For many of us, for all of the reasons we just mentioned, aggression, anger, competition, heroism, and all of the shadows of dominance, oppression, victory at the cost of being a bully, dominance, all of these energies, their dark sides are very, very obvious. And so it becomes easy to sort of say, well, that's the problem. It's the yang energy that is the problem, and behind all of the problems everywhere. In my humble opinion, that is a gross oversimplification, and it's problematic because reality is literally constructed by the myriad, endless interactions of yin and yang. And again, as categories that quite literally are beyond gender and sex. So unless we develop a healthy relationship and learn to differentiate between the light and dark qualities of yang or fire or Mars or whatever, we're going to have problems. Because when you demonize something and turn things into black and white, good and evil, etc., and yang becomes like evil or something like that, that's problematic. Not that it doesn't have a legitimate dark side, right? But how do we heal our relationship with this energy that's at work in and through everything? So I think that's a question I don't have any answers for, but I know that for me, like, just speaking again one final time to my personal experience of this transit, there's a great quote from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and he basically tells Arjuna, like, there's no growth or spiritual evolution through artificial repression. You can't just artificially repress things and then suddenly be liberated from them. There's a way in which the only way out from some kind of unhealthy attachment or entanglement is through. And to me, this means that we have to be willing to work with the desires, the fire, the energy of the Mars. For me as a Taurus, Aries occupies my 12th house. If you have a Mars ruled sign in your 12th house, chances are that it is a little bit more challenging to work into that area for very obvious reasons. Like as a Taurus rising, you're a creature of Venus. Mars is a little bit more tricky. It's like it's a blind spot. So to me, there's only one way out, and it's through. You have to go in the areas that you are interested in, that you are drawn to. You have to do so humbly with a willingness to learn and a kind of audacious courage to move in the directions that are scary, but that you feel compelled to explore. There's a very pioneering and exploratory side to Aries that says it's like, just go and take to the highway, pursue a path that feels compelling and a little risky, and just go into it humbly, knowing that you may learn, you may grow. Whatever you experience, it won't last. There's no, like, North Node is in Aries right now too, right? So there's no illusions here. It's Rahu's sign. It's like, no, you're going in this direction because you're compelled to do so by the force of desire. Just go into it knowing that whatever you accomplish or achieve, it's not going to solve all the problems of the world. But also that doesn't mean that you can bypass it. You can't skip past what you are being compelled to learn or go into with respect to Mars right now. So that's it. I hope that this has been useful and interesting. Share your stories. Do you have a grabbed story? Use the hashtag grabbed or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Tell us the transit, if it's Mars-Chiron or the solar eclipse in Aries, and tell us your story. We'll hopefully do some more storytelling episodes soon. There's been so many transits this spring that I've been waiting for an opening. We'll have one again soon. We'll be looking at eclipses, Jupiter, Uranus, and more. So anyway, hope you guys are having a good day. We'll see you again soon. Stick around after I sign off to learn more about the horary program. All right, bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you guys more about the upcoming horary astrology program, which begins later in June. And I hope that if you have never learned anything about horary, that you will, at least in listening to this, be exposed to horary astrology, have a little bit of an understanding of what it is. And if not now, then maybe sometime in the future, you can take time to study it. It is one of the forms of astrology that dates back to the earliest eras of astrology, the Hellenistic era, the medieval era, the early Indian period of astrology. And it is a branch of astrology that is concerned with specific predictive questions. So, for example, a horary question is usually formed in terms of a yes or no answer, and it is cast from the location of the astrologer at the time that the astrologer receives the question. So a typical horary question might be, will I get the job? Or will we get married? Or my cat went missing, will she come back? There are applications of horary astrology that involve the location of missing items, like where is my missing pen? Or where is, I actually helped a farmer one time locate a missing bull that had gotten out of the pasture. So it's a really, really fascinating form of astrology. It's very old, and it is like the birth chart of a question, a predictive question. So again, if I receive a question from someone and it's like, will I get the job? Then I cast that chart at the time I get the question. I usually use the receipt of the email time. And then I cast a chart for that question. And there are a series of traditional techniques that have been around for a very long time, thousands of years, that are used to determine the answer to that question. So with that in mind, let me show you a chart and you can learn, see what it's like in real time. So this chart is, the question that was asked is, will my spouse keep his job? This is a woman who had some very good reason to worry that her spouse might be getting laid off. And so she wanted to know, so she could prepare herself, is he in fact going to be laid off from his job? And so when I receive that question, that's a horary question. When I receive it at 9:03 a.m. on April 10th of 2023, a little over a year ago, here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live, I cast a chart that becomes the birth chart of that question. I then use a series of techniques, and that's what you're going to learn in the horary program, are those techniques that go into answering all different kinds of questions. questions about jobs, questions about money, questions about health, questions about marriage or relationships, questions about babies, questions about in pregnancy. I mean, you name it. And even missing pets and people and missing items. You see a lot of different approaches in horary. And so over the course of a year, we study those approaches to different kinds of questions, and we practice and practice with different charts of different questions, learning the techniques so that we can have this predictive tool in our kit as an astrologer. So anyway, here's a question: will spouse keep his job? In horary, what happens is you are always looking at the planets that represent the people and aspects of the question. The person asking the question is called the querent. The querent is always given the ruler of the ascendant and usually the moon as a co-signifier of the querent. So in this case, Gemini is rising. So we're going to give Mercury to the querent and the moon. Well, we can see the moon is sitting right on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, which shows us that the querent, the person asking the question, is indeed really concerned about their spouse. The placement of the moon gives that away because it's sitting on the cusp of the 7th, which is going to be the house of the partner. So you see little things like that. They're a little wink that you have you have a radical chart, so to speak. Now, the 7th house ruler is going to be the spouse. That's Jupiter, since Sagittarius sits on the 7th house cusp. In horary, we use quadrant-based houses because the theory was all developed through quadrant-based house systems, which is interesting. So this is the only place in my practice that I teach from and use a quadrant-based house system, not whole sign. Anyway, it's really fascinating to look at this chart because Jupiter is going to represent the spouse. So we can see Jupiter over here, about to be conjoined by the sun. Then we look at the spouse's job. And the spouse's job is going to be the 10th house from the spouse. The 10th house from the 7th is going to be the ruler of the 4th. That's called derived houses. This is something that appears in horary quite a bit. So if we take the spouse as house 1 and we count 1 through 10 from house 7, we get to the cusp of house 4 for the 10th from the 7th, or the spouse's job. That is the sun. So here we see that the sun, exalted sun in Aries, is about to conjoin Jupiter. This means that Jupiter is combust. And when Jupiter is combust like that so badly and the sun is about to conjoin it, that is a moment of death for Jupiter. So the job, we know that combustion from a planet like that is often implied in the charts of death, or that's a condition of debility for Jupiter at the hands of the exalted sun. And Jupiter is, of course, sitting on the 12th house cusp, which is the derived 6th from the 7th house of the spouse, a place that was associated with misfortune. So we can see that this is a very clear indication that that Jupiter is being debilitated by, burnt up by the job. And that moment that's coming of the conjunction could be positively looked at as maybe a death and rebirth of your career. But the first thing that's happening is the death. When it is a possibility built into the question that he could be one of the people that's about to be laid off at his company, and you have this kind of symbolism, this is very clearly a yes, your husband is about to be laid off because of that combustion and the upcoming combustion and conjunction from the sun. Now you might say, what about Cazimi? Doesn't the Cazimi mean like a rebirth? Yeah, but not first, right? The first thing that happens is that Jupiter is being burnt up by the sun. When the sun is the job and Jupiter is the spouse, and there is a possibility that this kind of event happens, then yes, that is exactly what happens. We can also see, if we take out the outer planets, which is something we toggle back and forth in our horary class, we take out the outer planets, and we can also see that the very next thing that is going to happen is the moon, as an indicator of the flow of events, is about to trine the sun and then immediately hit Jupiter, which means that the moon is also translating the light from the sun to Jupiter. And when the sun is acting here as a malefic, burning Jupiter up, this is another sign that the flow of events is going to lead that malefic sun to eliminate Jupiter. The malefic sun only in this context because Jupiter is combust. So anyway, these are little rules of horary, and there's a ton of them, right? For every different kind of question, there are different ways of assigning planets to the parts of a question, and there are different techniques that we use to answer the question. In that case, the judgment of the chart was, it does look as though your husband is going to be laid off, and indeed, that was the outcome. Her husband was laid off within like a week. So the way that I framed it in the answer was very uplifting, because I said, this is when we see this kind of event, a Jupiter-Sun cazimi, which we've had in the sky recently just now too, as I'm making this, that can be a sign of rebirth. So even if there's a death and a loss here of job, the opportunity for this to be a career reset is also implied by the transition of this Jupiter-Sun conjunction. And she did write to me later in the summer last year to tell me that he found a new job. So, and it was indeed like a positive reset. So half of the art of horary is delivering the news. How do you deliver a predictive result without increasing someone's anxiety, in a way that's constructive? How do we take what we see and translate it for someone when the question is predictive? And there's often a lot of, people have a lot of emotion invested in the outcome. So this is a beautiful form of astrology. If you are interested in studying it, here is how to register. You go over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com, and you are going to go to the courses page. And when you're on the courses page, you're going to click on the horary course. You need to have a background in understanding dignities, aspects, and house meanings. And then it starts on June 22nd. At the bottom, you will find that there is need-based tuition assistance. And there are also payment plans that you can utilize, and a one-time payment saves a little bit of money. So, but if you need tuition assistance because it would be impossible for you to take the program otherwise, please be sure to check that out and come study horary. It's an amazing, amazing form of astrology. If I could do nothing but practice horary, I would, because it is so interesting to see the unique picture of each situation come to life in the context of a horary reading. There's no birth chart needed for it either. It's amazing that astrology can work that way. We always think, oh, it has to work off from a birth chart. No. We can use astrology just like we use tarot cards. Cast them out at the moment a unique question comes up. Cast a chart at the moment of a question, and you have a series of techniques and approaches that can help you answer it. So that's horary in a nutshell. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks for listening.